So he asks impetuously, can I come out there with you? Starts to go out there with him and immediately gets scared. It's like hooking yourself up on a bungee cord, and then you walk to the edge and you go, oh my gosh, can I really do this? I don't know if I can really do this. The problem is that we're not hooked to a bungee cord that depends on a bridge, that depends on the stability of the cord, the person who has it, right? Like, he's depending on Jesus. If Jesus says come, he's going to protect you, and he's going to have you come out and be on the water. Here we go. Ready? Welcome to Bible 365. So if you have never been here before, I am your host, Kathy Carter, and I'm bringing you the Bible in a year, 365 days. I am using the historical or chronological Bible reading plan, and that is available online at oneyearbibleonline.com as a free printable, downloadable reading plan. So you would just go onto their site, you would download chronological reading plans, print that up, and then read it along with your Bible. Today is October 9th. It is day 283, and our reading today is Luke 9, 7 through 17, Mark 6, 14 through 56, and Matthew 14, 1 through 36, and John 6, 16 to 21. So there's a lot of reading, but as it's been almost every day, there's a lot of duplicates in there. I have a new mic, and so hopefully it will be better. I don't know. I'm hoping that we won't get as many dog barks, but we'll see how things roll as we start to record, because I feel like at this point she's like totally drawn to my voice, and every time she hears me she just wants to say hi. She's being really friendly. So all right, 2-minute history. If you've never been here before, I do a history where we've been for the past 2 minutes. I always recommend, even if you listen to this history, this is like nothing compared to the 265 days that we've already done. So if you like this and you've kind of been in it and you enjoy the listening to it and everything that you're hearing, I would love if you went back and got your foundation all the way back at day one. You have nothing but time. So take your time, do the whole thing, read from start to finish. It is amazing. It is life-changing. You will not regret reading it. You might have more regrets skipping over it. So, all right, far as history goes, let's talk Old Testament. So in the beginning, there was the Lord, and the Lord was there before anybody else, and he is bigger and greater than we can even understand. Sorry, I got stuff just flicking around everywhere. And he, in his greatness, decided that he wanted to make some stuff, and he made the universe, and he made the stars, and he made the heavens, and he made the earth, and he made people, and he breathed life into us. And since that time, we have been in relationship with him. He created us to be in relationship with him and each other. So actually there was point and purpose for that creation. And then he told us to rule over the world. So that our job was to rule over the earth. And then in that garden, we were tempted by the serpent. The serpent said, did he really say that? Eve said, maybe he really didn't. And she wound up eating from the fruit, gave it to Adam. He ate from the fruit. Our relationship has been severed ever since. And so the Lord has constantly been doing things in order to bring human people back in full relationship with him. At the start of Jesus's time, he was the Messiah that was promised. Messiah essentially means that he's saving, right? He's like a saving person. He's saving a people group. And he was sent to save not just Israel, but Israel first, but the entire world. He was sent, Israel once again was supposed to be the ambassador. So he was sent to save Israel, and then they would tell the rest of the world all about the Lord, and then everyone would come and be part of that worldly family. And really, we're sort of still in that place now. Jesus was born, John the Baptist was born, and he was the herald. He told everybody about Jesus who was to come. And then Jesus was born, and Jesus has been doing miracles, and he has been healing, and he has been teaching, like telling people who God is, why that matters, what it looks like now, right? What it was, what it looks like. And so that's where we are. And so today we find ourselves in the beginning of Luke, and this is about John the Baptist. So again, we have a couple of different versions of this, but I'm going to try and give you as much of the big picture as possible. So it says, now Herod, this is Luke 9. Now Herod the Tetrarch, who's like a governor, Herod, for those of you who had never been here before today, Herod is the governor of, essentially the governor, Tetrarch, but sort of the governor. He's not the king. He reports to the king. He is through, I want to say, adoption. He is Israelite. He is Jewish. He's not necessarily through lineage, but he works with Rome and he works with Israel, but he considers himself king of the Jewish people. And so he didn't really love this message of Jesus being sent. And at one point, John was going around and he was rebuking all of the people of Israel. He was saying, turn and repent. And Herod was one of the people that he was doing this to. So this is what we find out with Herod. So this is after the death of John the Baptist. Herod heard all about everything that was going on. Jesus was going up and around and he was healing people and he was teaching people and he was doing things. And like all of these people started talking about Jesus. Like he was a really big deal. He was perplexed because some were saying that John the Baptist had been resurrected. So trying to figure out who Jesus was, right? Like much like we would do now, we do have social media and we have TV, but it's still a whole bunch of rumors and allegations and all kinds of things that aren't necessarily true. You kind of got to dig deep to figure out what's real. And the same thing was happening then, right? So Jesus was born and certain people were baptized by Jesus' disciples, but certain people were baptized by John. And John was giving this message, repent and turn back to the Lord. And then once John got arrested, Jesus is giving this message, repent and turn back to the Lord. It would make sense that people would think that this was John resurrected. So he was confused. And of course, that would probably be scary as well, because he's like, oh my gosh, I did something bad to this guy. So we're going to find out what he did. So Herod says, I beheaded him. Who is this I hear such things about then? So then he wants to go see Jesus. So let's hear about the story about John being beheaded. So Herod had given, in verse 17 of Mark, Herod himself had given orders to have John arrested, and he had him bound and put in prison. He did it because of his wife Herodias. Herodias was his brother Philip's wife, and then he married him. So they weren't supposed to do this. They were not supposed to marry their brother's wives. They were not supposed to marry their mother's wives. They were not supposed to marry their sons' wives. They weren't supposed to be doing any of these things by Jewish law. So this was even before Jesus comes in and makes these big giant declarations. Not only do I say you shouldn't be doing this, but you shouldn't be doing any of those things. But even before that, the law said you should not be marrying any of your relatives' wives. And so he did this, and his brother was still alive. So it says that John was saying to Herod, it's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. So Herodias was mad at him, and it said she nursed a grudge, and then she has this daughter. She wanted to kill John, but she wasn't able to because Herod was afraid of John. So all Herod did was put him in jail. Because again, he's dressed like a prophet. He's shouting things from the Lord. Like, you don't want to mess with those people. And so he put him in jail, but he wasn't going to do anything else with him. So finally, the opportune time came. On his birthday, Herod gave a banquet for his high officials and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee. And then the daughter of Herodias comes out and does a dance. I want to bring this back to, for those of you who guys have done your historical reading, I want to bring this back to Esther, right? So then remember when I was in it, everyone was like, why would this book be even in here? And we can see that it connects to so many other things. When King Xerxes was king, was when he made Esther his wife, and he would do much the same. He would have all of these banquets, right? And he would have these people at these banquets, and he'd be feeding these people at these banquets, and he would having these shows and other things at these banquets. And then so when Herodias did this dance, he was pleased. So this was a good thing. And again, you couldn't necessarily just come up to the king, but when he was pleased and when he offered you something, you could take it. So he says, whatever you ask, I will give you up to half my kingdom. I think these are the exact words that Xerxes used. So she went to her mom, asked her mom, hey, what should I ask for? Herodias was like, easy breezy. You're going to ask for John the Baptist's head on a platter. The king was greatly distressed, but because of his oaths and because of his dinner guests, he didn't want to refuse her. It would have been an embarrassment to refuse her after he had promised her he would give her anything up to half his kingdom. This is like a bound oath that he's giving. So he's working in the parameters of the law in which he has. So he can't break this. So the king was greatly distressed, but it says he immediately sent an executioner with orders to bring John's head. He presents it to the girl, and she gives it to her mom. And it says, on hearing this, John's disciples came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. So that's it. That's the end of John the Baptist. it feels like he was shouting. He had such a big purpose. His purpose was to herald Jesus into the world, and now he's dead. Like, if all things were good and just, that would not have happened. And yet we see this happen because of the way that the world works, and because there is evil in the world, even amongst people who say they follow the Lord. There are wolves out there, which is exactly what Jesus has said to his disciples. There are going to be wolves out there, and you are going to get into a lot of trouble when you go out there. This is the same thing. And so he killed John. And then when he heard that, so then moving down to this next section where Jesus feeds the 5,000, again, we have a couple of different versions, but this one version, it says, when Jesus heard what had happened. So remember, John was his cousin. Now, we don't know because it says John was out in the wilderness. So we don't know if Jesus and John had a relationship before they met out in the river, right? We don't know the River Jordan. We don't know where he was baptized by John. We don't necessarily know. It doesn't say any of that. What we do know is that they were cousins. So that's true. What we also know is that he was a herald for Jesus. He was the prophecy. He was the Elijah, right? He was these things. And so Jesus would have been very sad about this death. This would have affected him. And so imagine he then hears this. He hears that John is gone, and he brings himself out into a boat. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. So he went in a boat by himself, and he went to a private place. But he couldn't even do that. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot and into the towns. That when Jesus landed, he saw a large crowd. So he couldn't even be solitary. So imagine he finds out someone died, someone he loved, he cared about, which again, he's Jesus. He cares about all of us. But he found out that person died. He goes to be alone. And when he gets out there, all of these people have come. But it's all of these people who are desperate for healings from him, right? They're desperate to be made well. And he can't even sit out and be solitary. He has compassion and wants to heal and help the people. This is the God that we serve, right? So don't forget that we can say it's in humanity. We can say it's in his Godhead. I don't know if it matters either way, but the reality is he had some pain where he wanted to be alone. And because the people needed him so bad, he didn't even take a break. He had compassion on them, and he went and he was healing them anyway. Now we have this story about feeding them. So after he heals the people, it says as evening approached, the disciples came to him and they were like, this is like, we're kind of out in the middle of nowhere and we have no food and we have no water. So we're going to have to make them go away and go find something on their own. And then Jesus, he says, send the crowds away. And then Jesus replies, they don't need to go away. You need to give them something to eat. He doesn't say, I'll give them something to eat. He calls the disciples out. So the disciples want to get rid of them. Like, there's way too many people here. We're never going to make it. Like, we got to tell them. And maybe they were compassionate about it, right? Like, something we don't necessarily know. We don't really see that so much in the context. But he's like, we got to send them away because they got to go get food and we just don't have any food to feed them. And so he's asking them, by the way, they have already gone out and done miracles. So we see at this point, remember, he had sent them out. I think it was yesterday. He sent them out 2 by 2. And so we've already seen that they have the power to do things. They have the power to go out and heal. They have the power to go out and release demons. They have the power to go out and make people well. So we know that they have some power. And so he's saying you to feed them. Now, does this mean in the miraculous way? Does this mean he's just saying, I want you to do some of the work? Again, not necessarily sure of those things, but he is telling them that he wants them to do it. And they say, how? We don't have any food here. Really, all we have are 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And he says, bring him here to me. And so then he directs the people to sit down, and he directs them in hundreds and 50s. So he's like, these are massive groups. And he's kind of going, like, in this small group, go sit over here. You go out. So again, they're part of the action. You go out and you tell them how they all need to sit down and be part of this. He says he takes those 2 fish. He looks up to heaven. So he's looking towards the Lord. He gives thanks to the Lord for that food. He breaks the loaves, and then he starts handing them out to the disciples, and then has the disciples hand them out to the people. I also think he is once again establishing a kind of order here. There is order. I'm having a hard time in our weekly church or whatever, and figuring out what that necessarily looks like, right? Like, is there supposed to be just one person that preaches and everyone else is just supposed to sit there? Or are we all supposed to be part of it? Like, Jesus was the top and we're kind of all supposed to be intermixing and doing things. It looks as if in this and in other areas, Jesus gives the power to the people in order to do things. In some ways, I kind of think everyone has a role, right? Because the 50s and the 100s, really, they were just coming for healings, and maybe they had just heard Jesus for the first time, right? Like, maybe they weren't true devout followers yet. They were just people there that were there for the food. And so he's giving his followers, his disciples, a job to do for the people who necessarily weren't fully understanding what Jesus had to give yet. And then afterwards, it says they all ate and were satisfied. This is relatively easy. When Jesus feeds you, you're satisfied. Like, it just is what it is. I told you guys whether it was yesterday or the day before or whatever it might be. Not much in my life has changed in the past 10 years, but I am so much more satisfied. Not all the time, because I forget and I look away, but overall, I have a greater sense of satisfaction because I'm sitting in comfort in the Lord. And that's what's most important. So when I eat, I'm satisfied. When I'm given whatever it is he chooses to give to me, I am satisfied with that, and I don't need more or crave more that hasn't been given to me. Then afterwards, on top of the fact that they all ate and were satisfied, so 5,000 men plus women and children. So we're talking in the neighborhood of probably, let's be fair and say 8, right? Let's go a little bit low and say 8,000-ish people, fed every single one of them with a couple of fish and a couple of loaves of bread. And then they all ate. Everyone was satisfied. And then on top of that, they had baskets full left in order to take with them. So it said 12 basketfuls of broken pieces were left over. Now, after Jesus has performed this sign, so if we go to that Luke 9 section, it says, after the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, surely this is a prophet. So again, they were people who didn't necessarily know, and now they're starting to understand. They get this huge miracle, and so things are starting to make sense for them. And then it says, Jesus, knowing that they had intended to come and make him king by force. So he senses what it is. So they're excited that he's a prophet. The prophet to come may or may not have been right. It was supposed to be the David, right? So whether it was literal David or the generation of David, they're now like, okay, our king is back. I can understand why they would think that way. So then they come in and they want to take him by force. He doesn't gladly take the throne, as you would expect from somebody who has done all these amazing things. He actually retreats and goes up into the mountains. It says he withdrew again to a mountain by himself. After this, he sends these guys on a boat. I really don't get this one. I have to be honest, talking about one of the most famous stories that we probably know of Jesus, like anyone who doesn't even know Jesus knows the story of Jesus. I haven't figured out yet why. And if you guys have a thought as to why he would do this, I would love to hear it. This is where he walks on water. So he makes his disciples get into the boat, and then he goes up to be in prayer with the Lord. Makes them into the boat. He says, cross over. I'll come over at a later time. He says they go on ahead of him to Bethsaida. I looked up the pronunciation of it, so it's Bethsaida. It's actually like Bethsaida, something like that. But anyway, after leaving them, he goes up on the mountain and he goes to pray. Now, crossing over can take anywhere from 2 to 6 hours, kind of depending on the winds, depending on the direct route that you're taking, right? Like what dock to what dock. Because it says later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake. So he's up in the mountain for a while and they're out there rowing. It was in the middle of the lake because they had really bad against them winds. I want to say headwinds, but I don't know if that's even right or not. It was whatever was working against them. So they were trying to go in one direction and it kept pushing them back in the other direction, whatever that might be. My fishermen or boat people might know. And so shortly before dawn, he goes out to them and he's walking on the lake. So he sees them out there. They're struggling. It looks as if he goes out. He's just going to go meet them on the other side. So he tells them he's going to meet them on the other side. It doesn't look like they're actually going to give him any kind of, he's actually going to give them any kind of help. He just kind of actually starts walking on water to go past them. So this may have been a miracle that they weren't even necessarily supposed to see. But he checks in on them because it says he can see them from the shore as well. So this is another one of those like God moments. They're far enough away. If it takes hours to cross the water, I don't know how much they can see him without it being God that's able to see them. And then he goes and he walks himself across the water. When he's walking himself across the water, they do see him. And when they see him, they're like, oh my gosh, this is a ghost. And they're terrified. So in the one that we see, Peter actually talks to him. So Peter has a conversation with him. So Peter says, he says, take courage, it's me. And then Peter says, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water. Noting that Peter is courageous enough to ask God to have him come. He wants to go out on the water because he sees Jesus out there walking on the water. Obviously, he recognizes that it's a miracle. He wants to go out there on the water, recognizes that he won't be able to go out there. I mean, I feel like he recognizes he can't go out on the water by himself. He will drown if he goes out on the water by himself. No one has ever done this before. And so he asks Jesus, bring me out. I kind of want to come out there. This is going to sound, I want to come out there and kind of do the exact same thing that you're doing. So he says, come. And then Peter gets out of the boat, walks on the water, and then he comes toward Jesus. So he's walking toward Jesus, but when he sees the wind, so first of all, seeing the wind, you know, you feel the wind. So even that idea of seeing the wind. So he gets scared. He gets knocked off of his original intent of, I want to go out on the water and be with Jesus. Peter is always a picture, I think, of ourselves and some of our either impetuous nature or some of our fears, right? Like he puts everything out on display. He's wearing everything on his sleeve and we kind of see it all the time. So he asks impetuously, can I come out there with you? Starts to go out there with him and immediately gets scared. It's like hooking yourself up on a bungee cord and then you walk to the edge and you go, oh my gosh, can I really do this? I don't know if I can really do this. The problem is that we're not hooked to a bungee cord that depends on a bridge, that depends on the stability of the cord, the person who has it, right? Like he's depending on Jesus. If Jesus says, come, he's going to protect you and he's going to have you come out and be on the water. But the second he sees that wind, he starts to falter. And as he starts to falter, he gets afraid. And as he gets afraid, he starts to sink. And as he sinks, he cries out to the Lord to save him. The beauty, of course, is that the Lord does save him. So even in his own fear, he asks to go out. He loses himself. He falls. He asks the Lord to save him, and the Lord saves him because he lost his sight, but then he gained it back when he asked the Lord to help him. Immediately, Jesus reaches out and catches him, and he says, you have little faith. Why did you doubt? Like, what? I told you. I'm expanding. I told you to come out here. Why did you doubt? When they climbed in the boat, the wind died down, and then those who in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. It seems that they've seen enough at this point that they can recognize that he's the Son of God. So when they cross over, they land at Gennesaret. So once again, they're kind of crossing over and they anchor there. As soon as they get out, people start recognizing Jesus. They run over to him for all of these healings. And it said they carried the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. So he's getting no freedom everywhere he goes now. People are registering who he is, and they're all bringing their people out to get healed. They begged him to let them touch him, even at the edge of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed. So anywhere they would have touched Jesus, they were healed just by him, by his clothing, by everything and anything about him. And that's where we're ending today. So that's the end of our recording. If you guys stuck with me and it was a blessing to you, I want you to like, share, and subscribe, as I always say. And I want you to keep reading, guys. Come back tomorrow.